I just may need to eat a muffin for this chapter because it is that good. I'm so glad that you get to be a part of my home, and that we can really just do life and journey together. It's really an honor. This next chapter, just be obedient, is something that in the Christian world, of course we say you have to be obedient. Like, that's one of the core values, and character qualities that I believe God looks for in people's lives. Someone I was just reading today in Romans 12, it said, for us to be aware of what God is doing and be quick to obey. And I thought and prayed this morning, I was like, God, help me to be quick to obey you. God, develop in my character this heart that just wants to obey you. This chapter really came from a very defining season in my life, and it was when my husband and I and our family had moved to Colorado to help launch a church. We had served at a great church in Michigan. We loved that church. That was like family. I'd been there since I was 12, and my heart for the ministry and to be in ministry somehow was just bubbling over, overflowing. Like, I just loved pouring my heart out for others, pouring my life out before God, and seeing people's lives changed, in for the better, for a relationship with God. And so we moved here, and at first our church had supported us, and paid for my husband's salary for a good 3 or 4 months when we got here, which was such a blessing. After that, the church that we were helping plant, they came in and they paid for his salary for another good 3 to 4 months, 4 months, almost 4 months. But we reached a point in our journey where we knew that, the church being what it was, they needed to just pay for the pastor's salary. There wasn't any extra, wasn't any margin to pay for and support a whole nother family. Now, we knew that God had brought us here. And so we knew, we stood in faith and believed, God, you're going to provide. This is going to be awesome. But my husband reached a point where he had to look for a job. And coming straight out of college, we were in ministry. We had been in ministry, for as long as we remembered and we could fathom. Ministry just was our life. And when I say ministry, I mean working in a church. So that's what I was talking about when I say ministry. So it was time for my husband to apply for a job, and he was applying at like Home Depot, Walmart, Xfinity, like all these places. He got turned down, and the time was coming. It was just a matter of weeks before he had to get another job, and we were going to be without a paycheck. And so if any of you have been there, you know the struggle. You're wanting to believe God, and you're choosing, I'm going to believe you, God. I know that you're going to come through. And then the other half of you, though, is like, but God, why haven't you come through already? Because this is crazy. And amidst all of that, and me knowing and believing and trying to stand on faith that God would provide, there was this other thing going on me, and it was in me. It was going on in me, and it was this desire to be in ministry. And I would come before the Lord, and I just said, God, we moved out here to help launch a church, and now my husband has to get just a full-time job elsewhere. This is not what I thought. This is not what I planned. This is not what I thought, my life would look like. It wasn't a part of the big picture. I thought that we were going to serve you together, be in full-time ministry at a church together for the rest of our lives, and that was going to be it. And now comes this season and this moment where God is closing the door on working in our church, and he's saying, you've got to go, get a job. And I remember just being before the Lord, and I opened my Bible, and I believe it's in Acts 10, I believe. It's 7 through 10, somewhere in there. And it's in the book, so forgive me, I don't have the book in front of me. But it is when Paul is on the rooftop of a friend's house, and God, he like has this heavenly vision, this heavenly dream, and God drops this sheet down from heaven. And in it, there's all these hooved animals and things, animals that were unclean, animals that Paul had never eaten before, and Paul, says are unclean. And God lowers this sheet and he says, Paul, rise and eat. And Paul's like, no way, God. I have never eaten anything unclean, and I am not about to start now. But God responds to Paul, and he says, don't you dare call unclean what I have called clean. And because of this event, God was showing Paul that he was going to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. That's me. I don't know if that's you, but that is me. I do not have any Jewish descent in my body. I don't think so. I am a Gentile, and I am so incredibly thankful for that moment where Paul said, it's okay, just because I haven't done it before does not mean that it is unclean. God, whatever you call clean, God, whatever you tell me to do, God, that's what I'm going to do. And when I read that, it was as if the scriptures popped out of the page and God was in that room with me, and he said, Jamie, don't you dare call unclean what I have called clean for your life. You're looking at this job and in ministry in a whole perspective that I did not ask you to look at it in. I am calling you to this new season, and Milan will get a job. It'll be amazing. And I'm asking you not to call this unclean, because for your life, I have called this clean for this season. And I just wept before the Lord, and I said, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for ever calling unclean what you have called clean. And God did provide a job. Thank you, Jesus, for him. And it has been one of the most amazing transitions of our life. God has used this job to grow my husband, to cultivate the gifts in his life, and used him to be a witness in the workplace. And he's learned things and brought things back from that job that he can implement into church, into what he's doing there, into the creative design and elements, into leading a team. He's even opened doors for him to work with people who are best in the world in what he does. And that would have never happened if we wouldn't have said yes to that season in our life. Now, guaranteed, God sort of forced us into that season. But aren't you glad for the times that God forces almost obedience in your life? Let me tell you that obedience is what God is looking for in you. He's looking for obedience. And when you're obedient, even though you don't understand, God, I don't know why this is happening. God, I don't know why you're calling me to this. God, I've never done this before. And God's saying, I don't want you to figure out the why. What I want you to do is be obedient and trust me with the rest. And I promise you that I will provide above and beyond what you could ever need as you're being obedient to me. And so I hope this chapter honestly blesses your life. I hope this chapter challenges your faith. I hope this chapter brings alive things in your life that maybe you said no to God in the past, but in this moment, in this time, in this season, you're going to say, God, I choose to be obedient. And you know what the great thing is about obedience? The more we're obedient to God, the more he proves himself faithful. He proves himself above and beyond faithful. And the more he does that, the more we trust him. It's like this great cycle of obedience and trust and seeing God move. Obedience and trust and seeing God move. To where we get to a point where when we hear God, we can quickly say, God, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that because I know that you're a God of your word, and that you come through and that you provide. And even though I might understand why you're asking me to eat this unclean thing right now, God, I know that you've called it clean, and I know that you're going to do miracles through my obedience to you. And who knows whose lives will be touched through the obedient steps that you take in your life. So how can you cultivate a heart of obedience today?